The president came into the meeting and immediately started speaking. He had just a string of comments that Ukraine is a terrible place, they're all corrupt, they're terrible people, they tried to take me down. I tried to explain, along with the others that were there, each of us took turns speaking. I tried to explain that President Zelensky agrees with you, that he was elected because of that situation in Ukraine, and he has a strong mandate from the people of Ukraine to change it. And that's why it's important that we actually show him very strong support now. But the president was not convinced, and he said that Zelensky is no different, that he has terrible people around him. You know, it's not what I hear about Ukraine, what we're telling him. You know, I hear that, you know, nothing has changed, talk to Rudy, that kind of dialogue as I described.
And when the president said that the Ukrainians tried to take him down, did you have any idea what he was referring to?
I did. I believe that he was referring to the rumors of efforts to interfere in the 2016 election by providing damaging information about the president or about Paul Manafort to the Hillary Clinton campaign. That was one of the rumors that had been out there and that had gotten some support from the Ukrainian prosecutor general. Inside the U.S. government, I was aware that the hold was placed. I was aware of that on July 18th. It was referenced at an interagency meeting, and I got a readout from that meeting from one of my assistants. I then immediately spoke with several people in the administration to object. I thought that this was a bad decision or a bad hold, maybe not a decision, but you know, a process, and I wanted to make sure that all the arguments were marshaled to get it lifted. I know that we had a conversation, Bill Taylor and I believe Gordon Sondland and I, around the 28th of June, that later connected to, I believe, a conversation with President Zelensky, although I may not have been part of the latter. That being said, I was convinced after that conversation we had gotten nowhere. We had our White House briefing of President Trump on May 23rd. He signed a letter inviting President Zelensky to the White House on May 29th, and for several weeks, we were just temporizing with the Ukrainians, saying, well, we're working on it, it's a scheduling issue, you know, we'll get there, don't worry. And I told Bill and Gordon that I was going to see President Zelensky in Toronto, and I feel an obligation to tell him the truth, that we have a problem here, we're not getting a date scheduled, here's what I think the problem is. It's the negative information flow from Mayor Giuliani. And that he would, also that I would advise him that he should call President Trump personally because he needed to renew that personal relationship and be able to convey to President Trump that he was serious about fighting corruption, investigating things that happened in the past and so forth. So I did all of that with President Zelensky in a pull-aside after our formal bilateral meeting. I thought that this would be the best opportunity. It was the first high-level meeting that we were having in Washington with a senior U.S. official, Ambassador Bolton, after President Zelensky's inauguration. I thought it would be a great opportunity for the Ukrainians to make their case. They are the new team in town, real deal about fighting corruption. I was rather disappointed with the meeting as it transpired. It struck me as down in the weeds. Talking about reform of national security structures in Ukraine and legislation that they were working on, and not the big picture and not the bilateral relationship. So I was a bit disappointed by that. At the end of the meeting, I do recall having seen some of the other testimony. I believe Ambassador Sondland did raise the point of investigations in a generic way. This was after the meeting was already wrapping up, and I think all of us thought it was inappropriate, and the conversation did not pick up from there. The meeting was over. We all went outside, and we had a picture taken in front of the White House, and then all of us, except Ambassador Bolton, went down to the wardroom to talk through follow-up about how do we follow up on this meeting to keep the momentum in the relationship. Only the very bare bones readout that I had received.
Mr. Zeldin asked you in the deposition that in no way, shape, or form, in either readouts from the United States or Ukraine, did you receive any indication whatsoever for anything that resembled a quid pro quo. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the same would go for this new allegation of bribery?
I've only seen an allegation of bribery in the
Okay.
last week.
It's the same common set of facts. It's just instead of quid pro quo, now it's bribery.
I was never involved in anything that I considered to be bribery at all,
Okay, or extortion.
or extortion.
Okay,
May I make a second observation as well?
absolutely.
I do remember having seen some of the testimony of Mr. Kent, a conversation in which he had asked me about the conspiracy theories that were out there in Ukraine. I don't remember what the date of this conversation was. And my view was, well, if there are things like that, then why not investigate them? I don't believe that there's anything to them. If there is, 2016 election interference is what I was thinking of. We would want to know about that, but I didn't really believe there's anything there to begin with.
You testified in your deposition to the extent the Ukrainians were going to investigate other Ukrainians for wrongdoing, that was perfectly appropriate in your mind?
Correct. That has been U.S. policy for years.
So if certain Ukrainians involved with the Burisma company,
Well, that I think is the only plausible thing to look at there. As I said, I don't find it plausible or credible that Vice President Biden would have been influenced in his duties, but whether individual Ukrainians in the society that we know Ukraine has been for decades were trying to act in a corrupt way or to buy influence, that's plausible.
Deputy Assistant Secretary Kent last Wednesday told us